Speaking of numbers, Trayce Jackson-Davis has been piling numbers up big time. He is the first Division I player in the last 25 years to tally 65 points, 20 rebounds, 8 assists, 9 blocks in a 2-game stretch.
Yeah.
And that didn't come against Kennesaw State and Elon. It came against Big Ten competition.
Right.
On the road, one of those.
Yeah, he's just been phenomenal, and it's great to see. I've always liked him as a player and wanted to see his team succeed so that he could get that talent onto the biggest stage. And he's only played in 2 NCAA tournament games to this point, and one of them was a first 4 games. So, and the other one was an exhausted performance after they flew 7,000 miles because the committee didn't give him much of a good deal there. Let that be an admonishment to the committee this year that it's not that hard. Dayton is here. Columbus has a site. Greensboro has a site. You know, it's not that hard to make sure that they wind up in one of those places. Because like when I was doing my brackets last March, I did it every time. I never sent anybody. And if I sent anybody on a trip, it was usually on the way home. Like if I sent somebody to Texas or whatever, it's because they were from Texas. In that first 4 circumstance, everybody else can go anywhere. But in the first 4, because you have to play that extra game, you shouldn't have to fly all the way to Portland for your second round game. But I think Trayce is just doing wonderful things. And I spoke to him in the preseason at Big Ten Media Day, and he talked about, the fact that he was going to wind up in the top 3. I brought it up, not him. He was going to wind up in the top 3 in points, rebounds, and blocks at IU. And you know the names there that he's either in the company of or passing. They're Hall of Fame, college basketball Hall of Fame all-timer guys that he's in that company with, and that he's but they all played in the biggest games. That's the difference right now between their career and his. And I know that he wants that. And I like the fact that he basically said, look, man, this giving up 90-point stuff is not going to work. We got to get going. And he's done that with his team over the last 3 games. It's really cool to see. I wish him the best in February and hopefully a successful March.
Yeah, I mean, it has been a complete turnaround. I played the clip yesterday because that's what I asked both Mike and Trayce after the game. What was it? There's a switch that was flipped after that 3 loss. It was like, because this is not the same team.
Nope.
That team,
same players, though. Same. That's the thing. Same players. They're still waiting for X. They're still waiting for Race. And so it is the same team. It is the same players, but it's not the same team.
And I understand what Mike was saying now. When they at Iowa, they got right or wrong, they got shell-shocked and they did not respond.
Yes.
Now, that's partly not good because you want your team to be able to respond to whatever situation comes up. But I get it in that game. I don't understand why it took them, 2 more games to get to that point. But
well, I will say, Jim, I understand. I understood at the time because I didn't think they could change. I didn't think they were capable of it. So that's
it didn't seem like they cared enough.
No, I think there was probably a lack of emphasis there. Yes. But I still don't see how, how could you go from allowing 90 basically on average? Like in those 3 games, it was like 88 point something, 88.3, I think is the actual number.
40 something.
55. How do you go from how 88.3 to 55? It's astonishing. And did you get an answer from those guys on what the difference was? Because I still don't know.
Yes, but I don't understand it. It's just them getting back to the principles of working harder. Mike said that I had to be more demanding. The practices had to be harder. And so that tells me, well, why weren't you being demanding to begin with? Because you have to demand, you have to pull that out of guys. And I think that that's one of the reasons why we had questions about this team's toughness. They weren't playing tough. Even when they were winning, they weren't playing tough. And so they needed that 3-game losing streak to ever become what they can become, because they needed to see that and feel that punch in the gut 3 games in a row and either get sick of it or get used to it. It's one of the two. And good for them. They got sick of it. And man, it's been fun to watch though. The Illinois game was dominant. I mean, they were just playing dominant. And I'm like, wow, on the road even. And Illinois starts 3 6-10 guys.
Yeah, I think some of it, I without having gotten a chance to ask him or anything, I think some of it was Race using his leadership, using his both vocally and in terms of example, that they were not going to continue to do that, because continuing to do that would have meant this entire year was, from a basketball standpoint, wasted. Like if they continued on the path of allowing 88.3 points per game or somewhere in that vicinity, they weren't going to make the field. All the time he invested in trying to carry Indiana basketball back to where it had been would have been basically totally misspent. And so he put the hammer down and said, guys, we got to do better. And then he did on his own provide that example. I will say, Jim, I think you'll probably agree with this, that I don't think he was 100% for some of that period of time, because he himself looks like an entirely different player, and the player that we expected him to be, not the player that we saw in some of those other games where they weren't performing well. And it's like, what's up with Trayce? I mean, it just doesn't look the same in that game against Dane Danger. I mean, that was, that was an absolute lesson. I mean, he was getting the ball and they weren't doubling, so he was just getting the ball and he's palming it like he's Julius Erving, and he's like, watch what I do this time. It'll be fun. It was just really something to see.
He was starting further out. He was getting the ball 8 feet from the basket. I'm like, oh man, I've never seen him get the ball further away than 4 feet, turn around and do what he does. But yeah, getting the ball further out and then making moves, I was like, who the hell is that? So great to see for that entire team. And one of the biggest things, with or without Trayce Jackson-Davis, it doesn't matter how well he performs. If Indiana does not have supporting cast members like Tamar Bates, Trey Galloway, and Jalen Hood-Schifino perform every game, they've got to get good games out of 2 of those 3 every game for this team to continue winning. But Trey Galloway has really, really becoming a complete basketball player. He can handle the ball. He can play defense. He's learning how to trust himself to shoot from outside. He'll take it in towards the rim if he needs to, and he can distribute. I'm not saying he's the next coming of the greatest point guard in the history of the world, but from where he was and where he is right now, big difference. Big difference.
And let's not exempt Jordan Geronimo from that. He was one of the guys who was struggling most on defense during that rough stretch. And he was the guy then that took a lot of the responsibility for dealing with Joey Hauser so successfully on Sunday. So I think Jordan has done, as much as the team has done a 180, he did a lot of, he's had a lot of success as well. And then the team also went bigger for a time with Malik Renew, and he played very well against Michigan State. 6 points, 5 rebounds, a nice contribution from him. And I'll tell you what, you had to love Miller Kopp's attitude on Sunday against the Spartans. I mean, he got a little feisty there. Maybe I'd seen him play, 100 games or whatever, and I never saw that before. So that, as long as it stays on this side of the line, and he did, that's great to see.
Well, and he has not brought a lot to the team from a statistical standpoint, but that in and of itself can be something that you don't see on the stat sheet that helps this team, because that's something else I brought up in the post game, was that was the first time I saw that team play with emotion, not just playing hard, but playing with emotion. There's a difference, and they were emotionally invested in that game, and he was one of them. And of course, his only bucket was on a baseline dunk, which is kind of funny because he can't get him to take jump shots. But yeah, the fact that his score was on a baseline dunk really just shows how this team can do things opposite of what everyone expects them to do.
Yeah, I think one thing that they still need to do is they need to work harder to get Miller shots, however they go about it, whether it's stationing him on the same side with Trayce. Obviously that wasn't going to work against Illinois because they weren't doubling. But whether it's that or running him off some screens or something like that, I still think it's a wasted resource to play him for 30 minutes and get 2-3 shots a game. I think he's got so much more that he can offer offensively than they're getting out of him, and something that as they continue on through the conference, I think they'll need. I think that they'll need more offensive production out of the 30 minutes or so that they invest in that position.
My question is, though, with even Trey Galloway, he has no problem getting his shots off. And other guys no one actually has a problem getting shots off except Miller Kopp. And
because I'm like, he's a player you need to work to get open, Jim. Some guys, some guys are not shot creators, they're shot takers. He needs to be run off screens, or he needs to be the post feeder that gets the ball back off a kick out. He's not, except for that rare when he gets the ball in that position, ability to dunk that. I mean, he's not going to drive the basketball. It's not what he does.
I know, but when you've got 4 other guys on the court who are able to do, they don't need special help other than Trayce having to get someone get the ball to him. They don't need special help to get shots. It's kind of hard for one guy that you're going to get 4 or 5 shots a game to intermingle that into the offense. That's why I think that Miller just has to work harder to get his own shot.
You're not going to turn him into, you're not going to turn him into Walt Frazier in 3 weeks. I mean, he is what he is. He is a catch and shoot guy. That's who he is. So you get him open, and when you do that, whether it's a pin down that gets him a short corner 12-footer or one of the 3-pointers in the variety that I described, he's a resource who's, I think the last time I looked, he's still shooting 46% from 3. He's just not taking any now. The number's staying there because he's not getting any attempts. It's a wasted resource.
Trey Galloway's shooting 50%. I understand what you're saying, but I just think that he's in this offense, he's going to have to work harder himself, because I don't think that they're going to really do that. I don't think they're going to. I think they're going to stick with what they're doing.
Well, but when they had Xavier playing and they had the 2-point guards, he was getting a good complement of shots. He was getting an ideal Miller Kopp complement of shots, and that has disappeared in the time that Xavier's been out, and it's been Jalen as the primary playmaker. I don't think that he has that. I don't think he has that feel yet for the perimeter shooter in the same way that Xavier does after 4 years of college basketball.